What's up? What's up? What's up? Welcome to the very first episode of the Can Do Creators. Episode one, we're launching a podcast in 48 hours. Hashtag I can do it. I honestly believe I can do it. Later on, we're going to have Dr. Kels, who's going to come on and basically talk to us about his podcast, answer a couple of questions that I have about what I'm going to need in regards to starting this podcast by January 3rd, 2022. This podcast should be up. And like I said, I'm going to try to use some of the most freeing methods possible so that way any and everybody can go ahead and implement these skills to launch their own podcast. Now, this is going to be my second podcast back in 2019. I did launch a podcast for my anime webcomic community, and that went on to do very well. But I used a lot of equipment that I already have because I do YouTube and I create content. So from the microphone to fancy softwares, all of that for this new podcast that we are launching in 48 hours, I'm not using none of those things. I'm actually going to take the audio that I get from this replay from Clubhouse and implement it into the podcast, which is really cool because on Clubhouse, you guys are going to get to hear the raw nitty gritty, and then I'm going to take it, edit it, polish it, and bam, put it. My whole entire goal with this podcast is to keep it very simple. I am not a woman who likes to edit whatsoever. For me, even on YouTube, editing has to take less than an hour or else I get bored and I leave it. So I record and I try to keep things in a form that allows for me to do the least amount of edits as possible. I honestly, most of these ums and stuff like that, I try to avoid saying them, but if they take place, they take place. I am not going to go through and nitpick every little thing in a podcast. And I've come to find on YouTube and other places, it works very well. People want you to be human. They know you're not a robot, so why aim for perfection when you can aim to be real? That's what I'm going to do, aim to be real. As far as equipment, we are going to be using the phone to record this podcast. Like I said, I think Clubhouse is a great way to kill multiple birds with one stone. And don't do this literally, but this is just a figure of speech that we are going to kill multiple birds with one stone. Record and turn on the replay using Clubhouse. At the same time, it allows for me to build an audience who is listening, kind of like people get these type of mistakes that happen. I just dropped my phone, but it'll be similar to watching a live show being recorded. That's the goal I'm going for. At the same time, it's going to build up the Clubhouse audience, take the replay, convert it to an MP3 player. There is so many different platforms that are going to allow you to do that for the free. I'm going to be mentioning all of that on the blog that's attached. Oh, yeah. Be on the lookout for that episode that's coming up real soon. How are we going to create a blog? Super easy, super fun. And publish it on to your podcast. As for podcast hosting, there is Red Circle, which is the one I've used in the past. Anchor, those are the two that I know and am familiar with when it comes to free podcast platforms, and there are other paid ones. But like I said, I'm trying to keep this to the bare nitty gritty minimum. And so we're going to be using either Anchor or Red Circle for this. And the art, when it comes to drawing the art or coming up with the for your podcast, use Canva. Canva has a ton of free banners that you can use for podcasts for just about anything. Plenty of free ones. And I absolutely love Canva for that reason. So all you got to do, go on to canva.com. I am going to post the link as soon as I can get it. And you can also find it on the website. And here's Canva pinned. Give me 1 second. wait for Dr. Kels. He's about to come in. But yeah, use Canva for the name. I think that's the hardest part, coming up with a name for your podcast. Honestly, I'm just calling mine the Can Do Creators. Exactly what this clubhouse room is called. That's exactly what the podcast is going to be called. And when it comes to music, use YouTube. YouTube has an amazing free library. And those are copyright free songs that you can use on YouTube and anywhere else. You download them on your computer and bam, or your phone, and you have full access to them. Only thing that YouTube do ask is that you give credit to these artists, which is easy. If you have a podcast blog, give credit to the individual, or at the end of your podcast, give a shout out to the name that was listed on that music. All of that cost me what? $0. Using things that I already have access to. Second, Dr. Kells is going to come through to tell us about his podcast and to share some tips. And if anybody in the Clubhouse audience, if you have a podcast and you want to come up and tell me about it, let me know. So, yeah. Another thing that I do know, a lot of us have a hard time with, and that I had when it came to my first podcast, which is topics. My first podcast had to do with the manga anime world, but there's only so much you can talk about, and I wanted to have one of those podcasts where we discuss and, I don't know, bring a whole new way of breaking down um, comics. Hey, Dr. Kells, good to have
Hey,
you.
how's it going?
Great, great. So yeah, so like I was saying, so that was one of the hardest part of doing my very first podcast, was trying to come up with ways to talk about different things. But you just got to go with whatever it is that your podcast is about. In the case of the Can Do Creators, it's about trying to build this creator community tribe of mine. So I'm just going to document everything. Talk about the good, the bad. Talk about, hey, me trying to launch a podcast. Talk about me trying to launch a blog. Um, what tips work? What didn't work? Do Pinterest really work? Let's go ahead and try Pinterest for 14 days. What happens if we post and share our blog, our podcast, our YouTube on Pinterest for 14 days? Will we really see an increase of traffic? There's only one way to find out. Let's test it out. But that right there is a perfect topic for me, and I could break it down into segments. But let's get into it with our guest, Dr. Kells. What's up? Welcome.
What's good? What's good? What's good? What's good, everybody? It's your guy can listen, because you know I listen from heaven to earth, to me, to you, instead of all in love. The owner, the creator of Unfiltered Love and the Unfiltered Love Radio podcast. New ebook coming soon. Fuck people. I'm gonna plug myself because she just said I couldn't, so I'm here.
Feel free, now tell us. I want to hear more about the podcast, and I also want to hear more about the ebook.
Podcast. So, if you ever listen to Unfiltered Love Radio, it is my job. It is my obligation. I have taken it upon myself to try to reach 7.6 billion people. No, I'm not going to do that by myself. I'm going to do that with the help of other people like you and people around the world that's going to take the message of freedom that I teach and ensure that people are lit. You know what I'm saying? Lifted, inspired, and transformed. I want to make sure you are lit, lifted, inspired, and transformed. So, I do that by giving you an encouraging message, but I also tell you get your shit together because you know sometimes we got to do that. And in this new venture, I'll be telling you to fuck people, and fuck really means forgive until change kindles. Yes, it sounds really vulgar and it sounds like oh it's so in your face, but it really means forgive until change kindles. Fuck people, and the first person you got to fuck is yourself. You have to forgive you until something in you decides it's gonna do what it got to do. Might not be
Every
good for
time
your
I hear that
SEO.
line,
Well, you have to fuck yourself first.
yeah, that line always brings me.
Hey,
But
you know
hey,
what?
that's one of the reasons I like your podcast, though. It is actually one of the reasons I do listen to it, because you have a way of taking these type of topics and just bringing it in a very raw hip hop type of way, just really like you live up to the name of your podcast, Unfiltered Love Radio.
I appreciate it. Yeah, really be. I really do. I want to be unfiltered. I want people to feel love, but I want you to remember, love is never one of these like things that's all sweet and cute and wonderful. And people hate when I say there are ugly babies in the world, and it's okay if your kid is one of those ugly babies. Um, but that's love too, because everybody's not beautiful. Love is not always beautiful. Love is complicated, it's messy, it's sticky, it's nasty. When you think about most religions, it's pretty gory, but their whole overall concept is love.
Sure. So, how did you come up with the name Unfiltered Love? So, for us who's creating a podcast, do you even recommend that's the first thing we go for, creating the name, or
So, when creating a podcast for the very first time, yes, create a name. Unfiltered Love for me, it came out of me and one of my friends were talking, and it comes after years and years and years and years of, trying to decide whatever. But the podcast came after the company was built. And so, but Unfiltered Love was a culmination of just my life. When you think about how love looks and the people who say they love you and why they love you, sometimes you got to swallow some hard pills. Sometimes people tell you, hey, get your shit together, but they don't mean it in a way that's going to be detrimental to you, right? They mean it in a
mm-hmm.
way that's going to be, hey, I love you enough to tell you that you fucking up.
Okay, that is indeed true. So, when did you start?
Very
You've been
first
in the podcast.
podcast. Very first podcast. August 2017.
Ooh,
Yeah.
wow, it's been a
Yeah.
while. So, you gotten a couple of you've been through the roller coaster ride of podcasting, the ups, the downs,
Whew.
the equipment's not working.
Whew.
Um, Apple probably giving you trouble because I've heard the rumors of Apple making it hard sometime for you to get what is needed to
You
launch
want
with
to?
them.
Yes, Apple. You know who my hardest was though, and
Go ahead.
it took me a year after my podcast was already on to get on their platform.
A year.
A year, and because I wanted to be on their platform, I didn't give up. It took me a year to be on freaking iHeartRadio.
iHeartRadio.
iHeartRadio was the hardest for me to get on.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I got on Apple and all the other ones way prior to iHeartRadio. iHeartRadio, when I tell y'all the hell I went through, and I was never meeting their criteria. Like, it didn't matter what I did, how many emails I sent. Now it's a little different. Podcasting has become podcasting wasn't a thing when I started. And so I think that was it too. Now podcasting is a whole thing. So it's easier to get into.
Yeah, because everybody's not trying to build up their own little community of podcasters. But
Right. And
wow.
there was no platforms like, I mean, like Anchor, that's what I use now, but then Anchor existed, but it wasn't the same as it is now. It didn't go out to all of the things and you could just go on, record and do what you have to. It was not that simple.
Oh wow.
Now life is simple. So starting a podcast now is probably the perfect thing to do if that's your genre, if that's your niche, if that's where your audience is. Um, and you have the video podcast, the audio podcast, so it's all of those.
So for those of us who are starting a podcast in 2022, what are about 3 to 5 things that you would say we absolutely need and that probably won't cost us much? I'm trying to keep this to the bare minimum, about less than $100. Would you recommend that people need in order to get their foot out the door? To just get started walking.
All right, to just get started, I'm gonna give you
Hmm.
3 things you need. One, confidence. Know what the hell you're talking about, and be accurate. It is it. You have to be the SME no matter what. It is you. It is your podcast. It's yours. And now, if you want to be wrong, goddamn day, people will confront you and correct that. So you kind of want to know what you're talking about, and you want to be correct. The second thing you need, um, everybody has a phone. Stick your head buds, your ear pods, your whatever in your ear, and get the Anchor app. That's it. That's how you start. You may not end up there, but that's how you start. Start somewhere, and it's simple. Don't cost you anything.
And what's the third thing?
The Anchor app.
Oh, the app. Okay. All right. That's cool. So, how do you come up with your topic? Is there a
Um,
secret to that?
it's not a secret to coming up with topics. You know, we all have things that we're interested in. We all have things that we say, "Oh, I really love this and I really love that." Most of the time, we lying like a motherfucker. We just saying that to appease to either ourselves for what we've been told or what we've been taught, or it's just things that society has. So whatever, like when I say you have to be the SME, you have to be the subject matter expert, so whatever that subject is that makes you feel good, whatever that subject is that make you feel like, you know what, I'm writing this thing, those are the times, those are the things that um you come up with. So me, it's based on, like I said, being lit. And so I focus on transformational speaking, I focus on transformational things. And that's why I can say fuck people and everybody's like, oh my God. And I'm like, well, if you're not forgiven until change kindles, then sounds personal. I don't have an audience for everybody. I have a specific people who want to come and learn and get out of their comfort zone and feel uncomfortable and comfortable with being uncomfortable. Not unsafe, but uncomfortable. So that's
Okay.
how I come up with it.
That's nice. I like that. What about finding that audience? Because based on what you just told us, you have a very niche based audience. Not everybody could come in, listen to your podcast, and stomach it, even though what you're giving out is really awesome information, but the raw, unfiltered way you are doing it, not everybody at this stage is ready for it. So, how do we find our audience?
I think you have to let your audience develop organically. I mean, you can go look for people and do, market research if you want to say, you know what, I think I will reach this people. I think I'll reach these goals. And it's the people like you. Most of the time we're gonna attract people like us, whether they're like us in our current state, have been like us, or where we want to be, whether they're like us in our current state, have been like us, or where we want to be. That's the people you're going to reach. You're going to reach the people that are you. You should always be your first audience. If you're talking about shit that you wouldn't listen to, who else is going to listen to it?
Got a point right there. So, okay, so I got it. I'm going to be my very first audience. I'm going to talk about stuff that I know. I am going to use a platform like Anchor or Red Circle, and I'm going to take advantage of the equipment that I already have, like my cell phone, to record.
Yes. And Anchor and Red Circle are good for that. That's why I like Red Circle. The Red Circle was my very first prior to being an Anchor. Actually, my very first was my computer. And it just was crappy. I'm not gonna lie, y'all can go back and listen to some old episodes, and they're not even full episodes.
Which is another thing. Is there a timeline? Do a
So
podcast have to be a certain length? I mean, can a person do a 5 minute, 2 minute podcast?
mhm. I have a friend Ty, and she talks about her day and on her podcast, and I enjoy her podcast. Her podcasts are no longer than 10 minutes. I mean, because it's a literal talk to me while I roll up my blunt, and when I start smoking, I'm getting off. And I like that because it's raw, it's authentic, it's just what she is, and I love that. So that's one of the podcasts. When you listen to other podcasts such as Earn Your Leisure or whatever, it's a little more methodical. So because it's a lot of formula going into it and a lot of research, you're gonna get a longer podcast. So this is why you can have Joe Budden talk for 2 hours and 20 minutes and everybody stays attentive, is because it's a lot of information at one time that needs to be broken down.
Good. I like that. My goal is to try to keep this one at about 15 to 20 minutes max. Um, so I'm
And
definitely
so
gonna take advantage of what you just said.
and that's good because if we're talking about analytics and I do a lot of research for my podcast. So I found out initially everybody was driving to work, right? And so
Hmm.
you want your podcast to be the length of a car drive. The average person was driving to work 21.6 minutes. So I wanted to get my podcast down to like that 23-minute mark. And you know why? NPR taught me this a long time ago. I have these sit in the car moments when I listen to NPR. No matter what the conversation is, I'm like, oh, I just have to hear this last minute. And I know it's going to go off. And so that last minute is usually some information that I was waiting to hear. And even if it's not, it's like, the sit in the car moment. So I always wanted people for my podcast to have the sit in the car moment. Like, okay, let me hear what's the last thing he's going to say before I get out the car and go to the office, go into this appointment. So
That's nice.
23.6 minutes, 23 minutes is the
That's a
average.
nice little tidbit right there.
Hmm
23.6. Okay. That's what's up. One last question I have for you, and I'm just very curious about this. You mentioned at the beginning your podcasts, they were not the best sounding, probably not the best when it came to editing either, and you kept them on the podcast. Tell me why. Why didn't you wait until you had the top notch equipment? Why didn't you wait until you were an expert at editing or that you could hire a whole studio? And why do you still keep them up?
So I keep them up for two reasons. One, for people like this, people that are the can do creators, that they can do it because it doesn't, we all start from somewhere and everybody wants to show you the great, I started from the bottom, but now I'm here. Well, that's freaking wonderful. You look like you've always been at the top. There's no social proof, right, of you being at
Mm-hmm.
the bottom. So show me how you were at the bottom and then I'll say, damn it, they stuttered, they mumbled, the sound was muffled. So I keep it up for that. And also keep it up for personal sentimental reasons, right? Because it reminds me that growth is inevitable and you have to grow no matter what. Now if my podcast still sound like it was sounding then, I may have a problem because I didn't learn anything. I didn't develop anything. I didn't actually put into the craft like I said I would. And so that's why I keep them up. And just for good reference for people, I think even if you go back and listen to the first podcast, I didn't even know how to say my name. I had this name in my head and I knew how I wanted it. I knew how I wanted it
I
pronounced.
remember.
And in the beginning, you'll hear collision, collision, collision. And I'm like, okay, collision is good because it's, heaven and earth colliding and I it creates me. And it's like, no, my name is Kellen and I listen. I'm actually a therapist. This is what I do in real life. Let's make this real. And that's how you become more authentic, though, right? Because you're trying to put
Mm-hmm.
on something and then you just become you.
Nice. Man, Dr. Kells, I really appreciate everything that you don't tell me. And I feel with this information that I can definitely launch this podcast in 48 hours. I know you're also working on some cool things for 2022. I got the link because I am a big fan. I do follow your Instagram, your Twitter, post really awesome stuff. Tell us about Freedom Coach Kells. What is going on? I know you told us a little bit about the book earlier, but combine everything because as I'm going through the website, you mentioned transformation, this program. Like, what's going on?
Whew. You want me to do all of this and you want to keep this podcast hollowed?
You got about 4 more minutes. So,
No, but seriously, man, I do a lot of dope shit. Fortunately enough, I had the opportunity to go to college and graduate, and go to college again and graduate, and in college again and going to graduate real soon. And so, along those times, I've acquired a lot of certificates. I've worked a lot of good jobs, and I've taken in a lot of information. And in 2019, I kind of started my own coaching business while I was still working as a counselor. And I was like, okay, where's the ethical lines? How do we do this? And doing that, I'd already been a motivational speaker for a while. And after kind of figuring out what do I want to do? When do I want to be this full entrepreneur? In 2020, I really had no choice, like most of America, right? A lot of us didn't have, or most of the world really didn't really have
oh,
a
yeah.
choice. And you're like, okay, I still need to make money but how? And so I just took everything that I've learned and all the certificates, degrees, and all that blah blah of accoutrements that it's like whatever. These pieces of paper they actually meant something, and I started utilizing them like they meant something. I mean, I'm still paying student loans, so so when you go to the
Doing
website,
something else.
when you go to the website at freedomcoachkells.com, you are going to see all of that poured into it. You're going to see all of the services and programs and the years of experience that I've had. I've been doing some of this stuff over a decade, and to me, it's amazing to help other people get to where they got to go. And like I always say, be free, live their mega life today.
Hey, I like that. I like that a lot. And when people go on the website, they'll be able to click either on the bottom or in the section about the ebook so they can sign up to get their copy of the Bug People 7 Steps to Kindle Forgiveness.
7 steps to Kindle forgiveness. That's if I have one shameless plug that I will not be ashamed of. It's forgiveness is everything you need to get to your next steps. Forgiveness is everything you need to get to your next steps. If you don't forgive yourself and you don't forgive people around you, you'll be stuck in a cycle and you'll continue to do the same thing over and over and over and over and over again for many years and waste a lot of time.
Yeah. I think that's very important, especially since we did this episode January 1st, 2022. What better way to set the tone than to remind people that forgiveness is a very important part of that growth, of the change, of the success of anything that you want to see moving forward from today. So thank you, Dr. Kels. So, and you guys, we are down to the last minutes. As you guys can see, I kept it short. I did not play when I told you guys I'm gonna keep this at under 25 minutes. Some of it is gonna be edited out, especially the beginning when I was just rambling. But shout out to Dr. Kels. You guys can find his information on my blog. Check him out. Check out his podcast. Check out his website. Get a coaching session, and most definitely get that ebook. If you guys are not already a part of the Can Do Creators Club, be sure to join that because when the book is fully available, I am on his email list. I'm going to be giving away a couple of free copies. Okay, you get a copy, you get a copy, your mama get a copy. I'm going to Oprah this book around this club. So be sure to stick around for that. With that being said, until next time, y'all, peace. Be sure to follow Dr. Kels on Clubhouse, social media platform. Thank you to those of you guys who came through and listened. Follow me. Bye.